In 1994, President Bill Clinton presented a portfolio of Balthazar's work to the president of Hungary. Now, you have some books in front of you here. I don't know how many were published of his work, but talk a little bit about these.
Okay, there are two different things. Talk about the presidential set. This is sort of a great story. We were working. I was working the night before Thanksgiving one year, and I got a phone call, and the lady on the other end said, "Okay, this is the White House. Is Mr. Korab there?"
No!
And
You took that call?
I took the call, and I'm like, "Yeah, that was my reaction. Yeah, right." And it turned out that it was a legit call, and that they had to get a gift for the president of Hungary, and they didn't have a lot of time. They're like, "Oh, can we get this Monday?" And okay, so we put a selection together, and we sent it off, but it was a lot of work.
No, this wasn't an already published book.
No. Korab printed them up and curated them and sent them off. I think we might have sent 30 images, and I think
It's a beautiful one here of the World Trade Center.
Yeah, the story is that the president himself made the final selection. And if you remember, there was a lot of joking about Bill Clinton liking fast food, and he did pick the picture of the White Castle.
Really? By the way, you can go to balthazarkorab.com. It's BalthazarKorab.com, and that is a great way to see his beautiful photography on there. Our guests again, Gary and Jenette Quesada. And Gary, I mentioned you are now an attorney, and so did you continue with photography work, or?
No, I only use photography when I needed to create evidence, which I do sometimes. I certainly enjoy it. I certainly keep in touch with the other photographers who went through Korab's studio, and like the Saarinen group, the Korab Prodigy are a tight group. We generally all keep in touch. When Korab passed away, everybody called, and guys like Justin McConaughey is currently probably the best architectural photographer that I know of, and he's still working and trained by Korab.
Oh, it certainly was a huge loss, but he did live into his 80s and leaves a great legacy in his work that he captured. How about more of a personal aspect of who he was, Jeanette?
Oh, he was a gentleman to the core. Yeah, that's what he was, and welcoming. He had the hospitality gift like no one else. I was reminiscing a little bit. I made the best sugo one year out of his garden.
The best what?
Sugo, a sauce, and I'm Italian, so it's got to come out. But I mean, he gave me his tomatoes and his peppers and all that. I went home and I just made it, and my mom and my sister and my kids are like, "Mom, this is the best you've ever made." And I came from Korab's garden, you know. I mean,
that's why.
He had a knack for just making you feel comfortable. You go to his home, and he had taken these old lilac bushes, and he had made them upside down, tied them up, and then he placed them around his backyard as artwork. And it did look like artwork. It wasn't like just random. He cut down a tree, painted them, cut them up, and painted a red on them, and then set them out just so. So when you went there, you really had a sense of another world almost.
Wow.
And it was just
And who better to capture the work of artists than someone who has that in him already? I mean, more so than just being a great photographer. It's something that was really innate to him.
Yeah, he never stopped creating. He was a great creative energy. He was this vortex of creative energy that swept other people along with him. But he never stopped. He was hard to keep up with. Jeanette just mentioned the garden. The garden was an ever-evolving place. Either Korab made the art or designed the plantings, and every year it changed, and every year he photographed it, and he was photographing it in the fog, just like Cranbrook. He would photograph in the fog in the winter. And Korab's garden has actually been published all over the world. And it's not something that I have a book on or anything like that, but it's published in Europe and Japan and in magazine articles everywhere, because it was utterly beautiful, always changing, and it was a real reflection. You asked about personally. I have a hard time separating the person from the profession, because they were, what Christian, his son, used to always say is that, "Dad, your work is your play." And that was very true with him, is that he he was always creating. He always carried his camera with him. His family was probably very frustrated because he always, when they went somewhere, they would always want to stop and take a photograph of something he saw. He was very impulsive and impetuous because of that. But you could hardly stop him. You know, we photographers as a group were like herding cats. I'm just thinking about Monica. Monica herself just taking care. Korab was like herding cats, and he was only one guy. and I guess I should mention that for people who don't know, the family is Monica, his wife of many years, that did so much of the work in compiling the archive. Christian, who lives in Minneapolis now, who is his own photographer, was very good. Very large number of book publications, many on Frank Lloyd Wright. Alex, his daughter, has been successful at, I think it's Time Warner. It was AOL,
AOL, right.
as a photo editor.
Oh, really?
And she's decided to quit and become an entrepreneur. But for many years she worked in photo editing in the press.
Does Hungary, Gary, recognize Balthazar and his works?
I don't know the answer to that question. I know he has gone back there, but I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
Well, we certainly do here in the state of Michigan as part of our series on design in Michigan and the powerful forces behind it, including Balthazar Korab, Damian.
You know, when the first few times that I met him, I really wasn't aware because I just arrived from South Africa of the importance of this man, but he left an impression immediately. The first building we worked on photography was, remember the Ross Roy advertising headquarters?
Oh, yes.
We'd done that, and he took those pictures. And he described it perfectly. I was just standing there as an interested party, watching all of this and watching him get the shots. And, you know, and he did understand the architecture. He understand the thought that must have gone through, in that case, Richard Black's mind of how he stacked these boxes on the corner, and he captured all of that stuff and the reflections. There were a whole bunch of pictures he took of that building that had to do the reflections of the building. So it wasn't just the building, but it was what was going on around the building and past the building on Woodward. And
that's where you get that sense of movement that you were talking about.
Korab used to talk about the life of the building, and he would often go back and back and back and back. In fact, he would plan out shots months or in advance. He would say, "Well, but we got to come back here in the winter," and he would. And I guess I want to make a comment because about Korab's influence in Michigan. This is well beyond Michigan, and if for listeners who don't know, Korab's archive has been obtained by the Library of Congress. It's not ready for viewing at this point, but this will be a national legacy.
That is wonderful. What is your favorite photograph, if you can actually have a favorite amongst all of his?
Boy, that's pretty hard. There are some that I love the ones that I showed here. These shots that are mid-century modernism with the people and you know, the SOM shots, and he has so many shots. Half a million images went to the Library of Congress.
500,000.
Yes.
Wow. Amazing.
there's one in particular that to me is very special. Do you have a moment to talk about that? The Fellows picture. Gary and one of his Fred Butters, a lawyer as well.
Oh, the Frank Lloyd Wright picture.
The Frank Lloyd Wright picture.
Oh, that's a great
Balthazar was credited with what we know is the last picture of Frank Lloyd Wright, or is suspected to be the last picture.
We don't know what the last is, but it's the last one we.
It's right.
It's the last one we know of. That's a lawyer's way to put it.
Right, a portrait of him. I've got some clauses I need you to work on in my proposal.
Yes.
But it's the last. It's a portrait of Frank Lloyd Wright, and it's Ateliers in West, right? Out in Arizona.
East, I believe.
Oh, okay. Never mind. But what Gary and Fred Butters have done is every time one of our colleagues gets their fellows, or attains the state of fellow of the American Institute of Architects, the two of you present them with a copy of that photograph. I have my story right, correct? So
everyone is an original print signed by Korab.
Oh, really?
So we don't. I don't know if we have any more of those. So.
Oh, okay. So those who have them, those who become fellows and have them, unique to Michigan, unique experience, and what a treasure to become a fellow and be given one of these by the two of you. you know, just flipping. Well, you've got the book Genius Loci,
Yes.
which in Latin is obviously the spirit, the genius of the place, which is about Cranbrook, and I think the word genius is so applicable, not only the place but his work and the genius of the people that came away from Cranbrook.
Thank you for
Cranbrook.
sharing the story about Balthazar Korab, especially from such a personal aspect from the Quesadas here. Gary and Jeanette, it's been a pleasure talking
Oh,
with
it really
you.
has. Thanks
Thank
you
you
guys
so
for
much.
coming out.
It's
Yeah.
been our pleasure.
And again, for Balthazar Korab's family, I hope they can delight in the fact that so many of us delight in his work and how beautiful it is. And sorry for his passing this past month, but certainly his legacy lives on for many because of the work that he did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Damian on Design, each Saturday here on the Lucy Ann Land Show. Thank you, Damian.
Thank you.
Damian
Thanks, guys.
Farrell with
Great
Damian
show.
Farrell Design Group and our special guest today, Gary and Jenette Quesada, talking about Balthazar Korab. Again, you can go to BalthazarKorab.com and learn more about this great photographer of architectural art and landscape photography. You are listening to Ann Arbor's Talk Station, 1290 WLBY.